On a Wednesday night in Indianapolis, in front of a sold-out arena and millions of people watching from their living rooms, the most famous basketball player in America got hit in the throat. A closed fist straight into her neck, in the middle of a scramble for a loose ball. No whistle, no foul call, nothing. Just the game, rolling on like it never happened. By the next morning, the league had reviewed the tape, suspended the player who threw the punch, and admitted, in its own roundabout way, that its referees had completely missed it in real time. By the next afternoon, half the internet was furious. The other half was rolling their eyes, calling it overblown. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise was a 24-year-old who just wanted to play basketball, holding her lower back, walking off a court she'd just helped fill to capacity, wondering, probably not for the first time, why this keeps happening to her. Here's the strange part. This wasn't the first time. It wasn't the second time. It wasn't even close. To understand why one punch could ignite this much outrage, this much division, and this much soul-searching inside a billion-dollar sports league, you can't just watch the clip. You have to go back. Back to the very beginning of a story that started 2 years earlier, in a draft night that nobody saw coming, and that has been building, piece by piece, hit by hit, statement by statement, ever since. So, let's go back. Let's start at the beginning, and walk through every single step that led to that punch, and everything that's happened since. Picture April of 2024. A college basketball player from Iowa is about to become the most talked about athlete in America. Her name is Caitlin Clark, and for the past 2 years she's been breaking scoring records that some people thought were untouchable. She doesn't just score, she does it from 28 feet away with a flick of the wrist, the kind of shot that makes grown men in the stands stand up before the ball even goes in. Her final college game, the national championship, drew nearly 10 million viewers. That's more people than watch most NBA Finals games. So when the WNBA draft rolls around and the Indiana Fever select her with the very first pick, it isn't just a basketball story anymore. It's a cultural moment. The draft broadcast itself pulls in over 2 million viewers, the most in the history of the event. Ticket prices for Fever games jump overnight, and not just a little. On the road, in arenas that used to struggle to fill a third of their seats, prices spike by triple digits the moment it's announced Indiana is coming to town. Some teams move their home games to bigger arenas just to fit the crowds who want to see her play. Her jersey becomes the best-selling jersey in the history of the league's online store. Average attendance at her games triples almost overnight, going from a few thousand fans a night the year before to, well, over 17,000. Television ratings, the kind of numbers that usually only matter to network executives, suddenly become front-page news. One game on ESPN draws more viewers than some NBA preseason broadcasts. People start calling it the Caitlin Clark effect, like she's a weather system moving through women's basketball, and frankly, that's not far off. But here's the thing about weather systems. They get noticed. And not everybody welcomes them. From her very first month as a professional, Clark walked into something most rookies never have to face. A spotlight so bright that every single bump, every hard foul, every shove was suddenly a national headline. And in her first season, there were a lot of hard fouls. It starts small. A screen here, a shoulder there. In her first regular season game, she gets knocked flat by a legal screen, the kind of physical play that happens in basketball every single night, and barely gets a second look. But then, on June 1st, 2024, something happens that does get a second look. A long, hard one. The Fever are hosting the Chicago Sky. The game is tight, back and forth, the kind of game where every possession matters. Before an inbound pass, away from where the ball even is, Chicago guard Chindy Carter lines up Clark and drives her shoulder straight into her, sending Clark crashing to the hardwood. It isn't a basketball play. It's a hit. And on the Chicago bench, her teammate Angel Reese, who'd battled Clark for years back in college, is seen smiling. The clip goes viral within minutes. By the next day, the league reviews it and upgrades what was originally called a common foul into a flagrant foul. Chicago's head coach calls it inappropriate and says her player will learn from it. Carter herself pushes back hard against the backlash, telling reporters that people are forming opinions about her from one short video clip, without knowing her, without understanding the years and the story behind her. And just like that, without anyone quite agreeing to it, a storyline is born. People start calling it a culture war inside women's basketball. Sports debate shows spend entire segments on it. Some commentators say this is just what happens to hyped rookies, that veterans always test the new kid, and that none of this is new or unique to Clark. Others see something different. They point out that Clark is white, in a league where most of the biggest stars have historically been black, and they wonder out loud whether some of the anger directed at her, and some of the anger directed at the players who foul her, has more to do with race than anybody wants to admit. It's a debate that nobody fully resolves, and it doesn't go away. If anything, it just gets louder with every hit that follows. Clark herself, for her part, tries to stay above it. Asked whether Carter owes her an apology, she shrugs it off. Basketball is competitive, she says. Emotions get the best of people sometimes. It's happened to her too. She even compliments Carter's season. It's just basketball, she says at the end of the day. But the hits keep coming. Later that same month, Clark gets into a heated face-off with a Seattle player after hitting a three-pointer, both of them picking up technical fouls. She tells reporters afterward that she feels like she's getting hammered out there, that this is just who she is, competitive to her core, and that it's never going to change. It's a small comment, almost thrown away in a post-game scrum, but it tells you something. Even this early, even in her rookie year, she already knows she's absorbing more contact and more attention for that contact than almost anyone else on the floor. Then comes August. The Fever are playing Chicago for the third time that season, and for the third time, a Chicago player delivers what looks like a deliberate, bone-rattling hit. This time it's Diamond DeShields, who comes barreling in almost like a football player and levels Clark, sending her sliding across the floor, skin scraping against hardwood. Clark cries out in pain. The image of her on the ground, in obvious distress, spreads across every sports outlet in the country within the hour. The league reviews it. Another flagrant foul. 3 games. 3 Chicago players. 3 controversial, bone-jarring hits on the same 22-year-old rookie. People start keeping count. They start calling it a pattern. And whether you believed it was deliberate targeting, simple veteran toughness being thrown at a rookie, or just the unfortunate randomness of a very physical sport, one thing was becoming impossible to deny. Every time Caitlin Clark went to the floor, the entire country was watching. Then the playoffs arrive, and somehow, the story gets even stranger. It's September 22nd, 2024. The Fever are in Connecticut, facing the Sun in the first round of the playoffs, the franchise's first postseason appearance in 8 years. Early in the first quarter, Clark is fighting for a pass, and Connecticut's Dejonae Carrington reaches in to try to block it. Her hand follows through. Her fingernail catches Clark right in the eye. Clark immediately reacts, holding her face. By the time the cameras find her again, she's developing a visible black eye that she'll wear like a strange kind of badge for the rest of the game. No foul is called on the play. Slow-motion replays start circulating almost instantly, and the internet splits in half again. Some viewers swear it looks intentional, the hand bending unnaturally toward Clark's face. Others point out that Carrington wasn't even looking at Clark when it happened, that she was simply following through on a real basketball play, the kind of accidental contact that happens in every single game at every level of the sport. Here's what's interesting, though. The 2 players at the center of the controversy don't actually disagree with each other. Carrington, asked directly whether she meant to do it, says it doesn't even make sense that she'd intend to hurt someone like that. Clark, when reporters ask her the same question days later, backs her up completely. It wasn't intentional, she says simply. Just watch the play. And yet, even with both players agreeing, even with the 2 people who actually have to live with the moment telling everyone to move on, the story doesn't die. Carrington, frustrated by what she sees online, fires back at critics on social media, calling out the double standard she feels exists around how people talk about her compared to how they talk about Clark. The exchange gets heated, gets personal, and gets a lot of attention, none of it the kind either player probably wanted. That's the strange engine driving this entire saga, even from the very start. It almost doesn't matter what actually happened on the court. What matters is what people decide it means. And the pattern doesn't stop there, either. Later that same year, Connecticut guard Marina Mabrey picks up what's initially ruled a simple technical foul in a game against Indiana. Days later, after another league review, that technical gets quietly upgraded all the way to a flagrant 2. By now, this kind of after-the-fact correction is becoming almost routine. A play happens, officials miss it or undercall it in real time. The clip spreads online overnight, and only then, sometimes a full day or 2 later, does the league step in and admit something more serious occurred. Fans start to notice the rhythm of it. The whistle on the court says one thing. The league office, 24 hours later, often says another. The Fever lose that playoff series. Clark finishes her rookie year with a list of broken records. Most assists by a rookie in league history, most 3-pointers, rookie of the year. She also finishes at having absorbed more hard fouls, more viral hits, and more national debate than maybe any rookie in the history of women's basketball. And here's the part that almost nobody was talking about yet, but that was quietly becoming the real heart of the story. While all of this drama was unfolding on the court, the money pouring into the league behind the scenes was becoming staggering. By the end of that first season, an economist at Indiana University ran the numbers and found that Clark alone was responsible for more than a quarter of the entire league's revenue that year. Not a quarter of her own team's revenue, a quarter of the whole league's. He calculated her overall economic impact on the city of Indianapolis at over $36 million in a single season, a number he told reporters was so large it almost didn't seem real. Ticket prices for Fever Road games jumped by triple digits wherever she played. League merchandise sales exploded, climbing by hundreds of percent in a single year. By the middle of 2025, the league signed an 11-year media rights deal worth $2.2 billion, more than 4 times the value of the deal it replaced, with major networks lining up to broadcast games that, just 2 years earlier, barely registered a national audience. Franchise valuations across the entire league jumped by triple-digit percentages in a single year, with Indiana's own franchise value reportedly climbing by more than 250%. People started calling it Clarkonomics, and given the numbers, it really wasn't an exaggeration. And through almost all of it, Clark herself was still playing on a rookie contract that paid her somewhere around $76,000 a year, a figure that, compared to the millions in value she was generating for everyone around her, became its own quiet source of tension inside the league. So now you have 2 storylines tangled together, pulling in opposite directions. On one hand, a player whose popularity is single-handedly reshaping the finances of an entire professional sports league. On the other hand, that same player absorbing hit after hit after hit, with a lot of fans feeling like the league wasn't doing enough to protect the very person responsible for its boom. It's a tension that was always going to come to a head eventually. It just took a little longer than anyone expected. Her second season in 2025 brought a different kind of pain. Instead of more viral hits, it brought injuries, a quad strain here, a groin issue there, that kept knocking her out of the lineup. She wound up playing in only 13 games that year. For a player whose presence alone moved hundreds of thousands of dollars in ticket revenue every single night she stepped on the floor, every missed game felt like a financial event as much as a basketball one. Interestingly, around this same time, the player at the center of that very first controversy resurfaces with a different tone entirely. Chundi Carter, by then no longer on a WNBA roster, appears on a popular live stream and is asked about the hip check that started it all. There's no bitterness in her answer. She talks about trash talk being a normal part of basketball, describes the back and forth that led up to the foul, and goes out of her way to praise Clark as a great player, comparing her, with what sounds like genuine respect, to LeBron James. It's a small moment, barely covered compared to the original incident, but it's a useful reminder that 2 years on, even the player most blamed for starting this entire firestorm holds no real grudge. The controversy, it turns out, mostly lived online, not on the court between the two of them. But while Clark's body was struggling to keep up with the demands being placed on it, something else entirely was boiling over behind the scenes, something that had almost nothing to do with her directly and everything to do with the way the entire league was being run. It happens at the end of September 2025. The Minnesota Lynx, the best team in the league that season, get knocked out of the playoffs in stunning fashion by the Phoenix Mercury. In the final minutes of the deciding game, Lynx star Napheesa Collier goes down hard after a collision with Phoenix's Alyssa Thomas, the same Alyssa Thomas who, less than a year later, would become a household name for an entirely different reason. No foul is called. Collier's coach gets ejected arguing about it. An MRI later reveals torn ligaments in Collier's leg. Her season, and her team's championship hopes, are over in an instant. That same night, sitting in pain in a hotel room in Arizona, Collier starts writing. Not a tweet. Not a quick reaction. A real statement, something she plans to deliver the moment her season officially ends. 4.5 minutes long. And when she finally delivers it, days later, in her exit interview with reporters, it doesn't just shake the WNBA. It nearly breaks it. Collier doesn't just criticize the officiating, though she does plenty of that. She goes after the entire structure of how the league is being led. She accuses League Commissioner Cathy Engelbert of negligence. She says the league's answer to being held accountable has been to hand out fines and hope the noise goes away. And then she drops the line that ends up everywhere within hours. She says the league has, in her words, the worst leadership in the world. But the part that really sets off alarm bells, the part that ties this entire story straight back to Clark, is what Collier says next. As a vice president of the Players Union, sitting across the table from Engelbert during contract negotiations months earlier, Collier claims the commissioner told her that Clark and other young stars driving the league's revenue should be grateful, that without the platform the league had given them, players like Clark wouldn't be making any money off the court at all. Collier says Engelbert went even further, telling her that players should be, in her words, on their knees thanking their lucky stars for the media deal she'd negotiated. It is, by any measure, an explosive accusation. Engelbert flatly denies ever saying it. Caitlin has been transformational for this league, she tells reporters, brought in millions of new fans. But the denial doesn't stop the bleeding. In the days that follow, the fallout spreads well beyond just the two of them. Lynx head coach Cheryl Reeve, who had been ejected during that same Game 3 collision and publicly criticized the officiating afterward, is fined and suspended by the league for her comments. Other star players start speaking up in support of Collier almost immediately. Aya Wilson, the league's reigning MVP, says she's disgusted by what Engelbert is alleged to have said and that she's riding with her teammate. Players across the league start echoing the same frustration. That leadership at the top doesn't seem to value the very people generating all that record-breaking revenue. Collier herself, who also happens to be a co-founder of a rival off-season basketball league that's quickly become an important second income source for WNBA players, goes a step further, describing the league's repeated officiating lapses not as bad luck, but as a kind of self-sabotage, the league working against its own success without even realizing it. Engelbert tries to walk it back, at least publicly. Before the league's championship series even tips off, she stands in front of reporters and admits that if players feel unappreciated, then the league, and she personally, has to do better. It's about as direct an admission as a sitting commissioner usually gives. But by then, the damage between her and Collier has gone further than a press conference can fix. A planned meeting between the two of them gets cancelled. People close to the situation describe the relationship as, quite simply, beyond repair. So, as the 2025 season ends, the WNBA finds itself in an unusual position. On the surface, it has never been more successful. Record ratings, a $2 billion television deal, expansion franchises selling for hundreds of millions of dollars. And underneath all of that success, a players' union that feels disrespected, a commissioner whose own words are now under public scrutiny, and an unresolved, simmering question that's been building since Clark's very first month as a pro. Is this league actually protecting the players who are making it rich? The league responds by promising change. Engelbert announces a new committee, made up of players, coaches, and league officials, tasked with reviewing officiating standards over the offseason. There's real hope heading into 2026 that this might be the season everything resets. New rules of engagement, a fresh page, a chance for the league to prove that it actually heard what Collier and so many players standing behind her had been trying to say. And then the 2026 season begins, and almost immediately, the old patterns start creeping back in. By June, the Fever and the Mercury, the very same Phoenix team that had been at the center of the Collier collision the year before, are in the middle of a heated back-to-back set of games. The first one on a Monday night is chaos. 6 technical fouls, 1 ejection. Clark herself picks up her 5th technical of the season in that single game. It's the kind of contest where everyone watching can feel the tension radiating off the floor, the sense that something bigger than 2 points in the standings is at stake. 2 nights later, on Wednesday, June 24th, the two teams meet again. And this time, everything that had been simmering for 2 straight years finally boils over, on national television, in front of a packed house at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Try to picture it. The arena lights are bright, the crowd is loud, every seat sold. It's a close game from the start, trading buckets, the kind of physical, attention-grabbing basketball that has become this rivalry's signature. Early in the second quarter, Clark pulls up for a 3-pointer off a pass from a teammate. Phoenix's Valerian Ayayi gets underneath her on the landing. It's the kind of play that's drawn scrutiny all season, players closing out aggressively and Clark coming down awkwardly. The officials actually stop the game and go to the monitor to review it. They decide, after looking at it, not to upgrade the foul. Clark is seen grabbing at her lower back in the aftermath. She stays in the game. A few minutes later, with 6 minutes and 52 seconds left in the half, the ball squirts loose near midcourt. Players dive for it in a scramble, bodies tangling, elbows and hands flying in every direction the way they always do in a loose ball fight. And in the middle of that scramble, Phoenix veteran Alyssa Thomas drives her closed fist into Clark's throat. No whistle blows. The game keeps moving. On the broadcast, you can hear the crowd's reaction lag a half-second behind the play, that confused murmur of people who aren't quite sure what they just saw, followed quickly by groans and shouting once the replay starts rolling on the video board. Clark stays in for a while longer, but by the second half, the pain in her back has become too much, and she heads to the locker room. The Fever ultimately lose the game, 111-109. After the final buzzer, Fever head coach Stephanie White doesn't hold back. She tells reporters the play was egregious, that it should have been called the moment it happened. She points out that officials had been warned about exactly this kind of chippy, escalating physicality just 2 nights earlier, in that 6 technical Monday game, and that somehow nothing had changed. Her message is blunt and simple. You have to call it. Less than 24 hours later, the league agrees with her, at least in part. After reviewing the footage overnight, the WNBA announces that Thomas has been given a flagrant foul 2 and a 1-game suspension for what the league describes, almost clinically, as recklessly making contact with her fist to the throat area of an opponent. It's not the first time the league has gone back after the fact and upgraded a foul against Clark specifically. It's just the most serious one yet. The Fever's team president releases a statement that night, short and direct. Player safety should be paramount in this league. It's the kind of sentence that sounds almost too simple to need saying out loud. And yet here it is, being said again, after yet another incident, on a list that by now has grown uncomfortably long. Within hours, the moment is everywhere. A former NFL quarterback turned radio host suggests publicly that Clark should consider leaving the league entirely and playing overseas. A conservative commentator tells a reporter that if the roles in that scramble had been reversed, the punch would have been treated as a hate crime. Fans flood social media, some demanding the league fire the officiating crew that worked the game, others insisting the entire reaction is wildly overblown for what was, in the end, a chaotic scramble for a loose ball that happens dozens of times a season in a physical sport. One widely shared post simply argues that either the league is trying to push Clark out, or its referees aren't calling what they're clearly seeing, and that neither option is acceptable. A well-known sports columnist who has covered women's basketball for decades calls the league's response, the single suspension with no mention of any consequence for the officials who missed it, a very poor answer to what she sees as a much bigger, ongoing problem. Within days, scattered corners of the internet are openly calling for Engelbert to step down entirely, pointing to this incident as just the latest entry on a list that, by their count, has grown far too long to ignore. Of course, not everyone agrees with that take. Plenty of longtime league supporters push back, noting that under Engelbert's leadership the WNBA has expanded into new cities, signed record media deals, and grown its audience faster than at any point in its history, and that one missed call, however bad it looked in slow motion, shouldn't erase years of real progress. The truth, as usual in a story this loud, probably sits somewhere between the two extremes, but in the moment, nuance doesn't travel nearly as fast online as outrage does. And almost immediately, the same old fault line from 2 years earlier reopens. Some commentators frame this as further proof that Clark, who is white, faces a different kind of hostility on the floor than her black teammates and opponents, hostility that officials seem reluctant to call. Others push back hard on that framing, arguing that physical, even reckless play happens constantly across the entire league, regardless of who's involved, and that singling out incidents involving Clark risks erasing the rougher treatment plenty of other players, including Thomas herself, who has played through serious shoulder injuries her entire career, absorb on a nightly basis with far less attention. It's the same argument that's been running underneath this entire saga since June of 2024, and 2 years later, nobody has actually settled it. If anything, each new incident just gives both sides more ammunition to repeat what they already believed. What almost everyone seems to agree on, though, whichever side of that debate they land on, is that the league's handling of officiating, broadly, consistently, across every team and every player has not kept pace with how fast and how physical the game has become. Even Engelbert herself, when pressed on it the year before, acknowledged as much, saying the league's various stakeholders were, in her own words, misaligned on what they wanted from officiating, and that the league had heard that message loud and clear. The trouble is, hearing a message and fixing the underlying problem turned out to be two very different things. By Friday, 2 days after the punch, there's a new wrinkle. Fever coach Stephanie White announces that Clark won't play in the team's next game. Her back, the same back she'd been grabbing after that earlier no call on the three-point landing, simply isn't ready. White is careful with her words. Clark is okay, she says, but there's no timeline for when she'll be back. The team has an open week coming up regardless, White notes, which at least gives everyone room to let her heal without rushing anything. So here is where the story stands. A franchise player whose mere presence on a basketball court has helped triple a television deal, quadruple a franchise's value, and pull in millions of brand new fans to a sport that, for decades, struggled for any national attention at all, sidelined again, this time with no clear date for her return. A league that suspended the player responsible for the latest incident, but stopped short of addressing the officiating crew that missed it in real time, or the deeper pattern that incident was just the latest chapter of. A players' union still carrying real, unresolved tension with league leadership from explosive falling out less than a year earlier. And a fan base, a massive, passionate, often furious fan base, split right down the middle on what any of it actually means. One sports writer, reflecting on the suspension in the days afterward, put it about as well as anyone has. The Alyssa Thomas suspension, they wrote, didn't solve the WNBA's problem. It exposed it. Because the real issue was never just one punch or one player or even one game. It's a trust problem, build up slowly over 2 full seasons between a league trying to capitalize on the biggest growth spurt in its history and a group of players, Clark included, who increasingly feel like the people steering that growth from the top don't fully understand, or maybe don't fully respect, what it's actually costing the athletes generating it. Will the league finally fix its officiating standards in a way that actually holds up game after game, instead of only after a clip goes viral enough times to force a review? Will the relationship between the players' union and league leadership ever fully recover from a rift that's already cost the two sides one canceled meeting and a public war of competing statements? Will Caitlin Clark's body hold up long enough for fans to finally see her play a full, healthy, uninterrupted season, the kind every single person involved in this saga, even her harshest on-court rivals, says they actually want to see? Nobody watching that Wednesday night game in Indianapolis knew the answers. Nobody watching it today knows them either. What's clear is that the stakes have stopped being just about one player. They're about whether a league that just doubled, tripled, quadrupled in value almost overnight can grow up fast enough to match the spotlight it suddenly finds itself standing in. Every previous controversy, the hip check, the eye poke, the upgraded technicals, the commissioner's leaked comments, the canceled meeting, was, in its own way, a smaller version of this same test. And every single time, the league has passed just enough to survive the news cycle, while never quite doing enough to make the next controversy impossible. What we do know is this. 2 years ago, a rookie walked into the WNBA carrying more hype, more cameras, and more money than the league had ever seen attached to a single player. She also walked in carrying a target that never really went away. Every hit, every foul, every statement from a coach or a commissioner or a teammate since then has been one more thread in a story that is still, very much, being written in real time. The punch that opened this whole conversation wasn't the beginning. And based on everything that's come before it, there's no guarantee it's the end, either.